Hello, good evening. Welcome to our third Twitch stream for everyone watching. This evening we are joined by Emma Ford, a student on our Masters programme. So what we're going to do, same format as last time, we will have a quick introduction from Emma and then we'll jump straight into digital art. And then if you've got any questions, just fire them into the chat and we'll try and answer those as we go along. So Emma, welcome to our Twitch stream. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump in?
Yeah, sure. I am Emma Ford. I am an illustrator, artist, and occasional animator. I live in North Wales, and I am studying an MA. My work is primarily fantasy-based, but I do portraits and landscapes, other things as well, painting, drawing, and more recently, digital art.
Good. Oh, what we'll do is, as we go through, there'll be quite a few people, possibly, or hopefully quite a few people putting messages in the chat. So I will read those out to you, so you won't have to worry about that, and then we can ask those questions as we go along. We have got the first one from Kiss My Artichoke saying hello, so thank you for that. And then we'll just dive straight into it, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay. We've got another one as well from Joopy Doodles saying hello too. There we go. So it's over to you now. So straight away we've got Photoshop up. And if you want to just tell us a little bit about the scene that you're going to be drawing this evening.
Yeah, of course. So I'm drawing a battle scene. It's for my graphic novel that I'm doing for my MA. I've already drawn out the basics and the more complex line art because I can't multitask when it comes to that. So this is the first layer. It's really simple, blocked out shapes. And what I do then is work over it and add in more detail to the characters on different layers so I can move them around as they fit, basically. So I've also done the very base layer of colour because I thought just blocking in colour would be really boring to watch. So that is where we are at the moment, and what I'm going to do is shade this. It's basically watching me colour in. Maybe a little bit more complicated than that, but yeah, I'm going to shade this as we go and see how far we get, and then eventually it will be a double page spread in my graphic novel.
Cool. So might be worth us having a little look at your website straight away. I will post your website in the chat. Are you able to, have you got it set up there to share? Let's have a quick look at some of the stuff you've done in the past. So it's always good for everyone to see what you've been working on and what you've done and what we're likely to see throughout the stream.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so the website has mostly been built for my degree work. So a lot of the characters are repeated illustrations of those characters, the main characters. There's a few commissions on here as well that I've done. You can see the different styles that I work in. So there's some digital, there's some pen drawings, there's a bit of watercolor, pencil drawings, that kind of thing. So I'll just scroll back up. And then I've got sort of the illustration and some of the commissions I've done. So this first one is another page from my graphic novel. I've done a group kind of body of work while we were all in lockdown. The MA group decided to do a square share thing. We all created work based on a different word each week. I did a commission for active writing about creative folktales, and the idea was to illustrate some characters to get people to write their own stories while they were stuck in lockdown. Private commission here for play a character in the Dragon Age series. Another private commission of a tournament night for a gentleman who likes to paint dioramas and miniature models. And just a few illustrations.
This is great. We've got a couple of comments coming through on the chats already. We've got someone called Holly. I'm not going to say the next bit. I'm assuming it's Holly Lou M. I love what I've seen of your graphic novel so far, especially your animations. Can you tell us something about your concept behind the graphic novel?
Yeah, sure. So I came into it wanting to create a fantasy story, but I didn't feel that just creating a fantasy story was enough. So I've decided to go with a female character. I feel that female representation is something that's quite lacking in a lot of the kind of disciplines. So I wanted this kind of strong female character that isn't sexualized in any way, things like that. And it's sort of telling her story. And the first novel is going to be about people's perceptions of each other. So when she comes across humans, how they react to her, how she'll react to them. And although you'll see that I'm doing a battle scene at the moment, a lot of the story starts that way. It delves more into kind of interpersonal reactions as the story goes on. And I just wanted to tell the story of representation and equality through a fantasy medium.
Brilliant. Absolutely great. We've got another comment from Dandy Mia. Impressive amount of detail.
Thank you.
And Kiss My Artchoke, they are absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
So good stuff. Also, I mean, feel free to go out and check Emma's Instagram at @EmmaFord_art, which is just underneath her webcam there. So certainly check that out and give her a follow. So should we jump straight back into Photoshop, and then we'll recap. We'll come back to your website again at the end of the stream too. And then we've got another one from Holly again. That's great. Thanks for the answer. Thanks for your answer.
Okay. So I usually... Sorry, Steve.
No, so straight away there, I mean, the first thing I've seen is you've got your circles, as most digital artists have their colour picking circles straight up there.
Yeah, that transfers between every image. So the pink-haired character and the ginger-haired character are the two main characters in the story, and their colour palette never changes. So I like to move that from one image to another as I go. So it just means that I've got some continuity with the colour.
So how do you go about picking those colour palettes? Do you use things like Adobe Colour, or do you...
No, they're completely just made up colours, actually. I wanted very bold colours for her, so hence the bright pink hair, and I wanted more natural, muted colours for him. So I kind of stuck to greens and browns with a little bit of blue, just so everything isn't brown, because I really don't like looking at images that are just brown. So I wanted to have something really bold colour-wise.
So which bit are you going to start with first, or which character are you going to start with?
I am going to start with the hair on the male character here.
Okay.
Just because I always start with the hair. I know then where the light's coming from, and it gives me a good indication then of what the rest of the image should look like. So I'll start with the brightest highlights. And the light is actually coming from behind the characters. So it'll be highlights sort of down here, like that. So I'll just sketch in really simple lines to begin with, and then block it out. Maybe blend it as we go.
I think we might have... your cursor's quite small, isn't it? You got a small brush on there.
Yes. Is it not showing it very well?
Yeah, no, it's... I mean, we'll see it, obviously, as you're going along, but...
Yeah, I like to work with a smaller brush. Obviously, it takes longer than filling with a big brush, but it gives me sharper kind of edges. I've made mistakes there already. It gives me kind of sharper edges and neater lines. I find if I use bigger brushes, it can get a bit too blocky and chunky, and it just doesn't look as coherent as some of the other illustrations I've tried to do.
We've got a couple of comments in the chat there. Dandy Mia's put works well, and then put the colours are vibrant. By the way, I'm Wanda. I'm not sure if you know.
Oh yeah, I know Vanda. Yeah.
Okay. Is it Vanda? Sorry, I do
Yeah, yeah.
apologise. Been watching too much WandaVision.
I haven't actually watched it yet. I need to catch up with some Marvel.
There we go. Okay. All right. So as we're going along, I will, if people feel free to put comments in the chat, messages, that sort of stuff, I will read those out for you. And also, I'll ask some questions too. The first question I've got for the viewers is: the sound okay? I know we've got some background music. If you can hear that, and also if we're too loud or not loud enough, please let us know. Roy B67's put sound is good. Holly's put sound is perfect. Danny Mir. It's a bit like a lift. Yeah, yeah. It's supposed to be. The playlist is copyright-free, chill-out music. And then Doopy Doodles has put sounds good for me. Great. Nice and chill tunes from Kiss My Artichoke. Good stuff. So let's start with some of the sort of base questions that I tend to ask the guests. So you're currently studying at Wrexham Glendower University. How did you find out about the course?
I can't actually remember. I was looking at doing a master's because I've started working on the kind of characters for this graphic novel that I had planned to do. And my husband said to me one day, "That's great, but what are you going to do with it?" Because I kept going in and rewriting the same little bit of story and back and forward, back and forward. So I started looking for master's courses that interested me. I did my fine art degree at Glyndŵr 11 years ago now. So I thought, and they didn't offer a master's at the time, I don't think. And when I realised that they offered one there now, I thought, well, it's local, it's convenient, and I really enjoyed studying when I was there. So why not go back and increase my skill set in a place that I already know and love?
That's great. I mean, we are. It is a small university, and it is. I always refer to it like Cheers. It's where everyone knows your name.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about it. I think that's why I like working there as well. So it's kind of, it's really sort of.
Yeah, when I came for my. Yeah, exactly. And when I came for my interview, tutors I hadn't seen for sort of 10 years were coming up and saying hello, which is really lovely. And I don't think you get that at the bigger universities.
Absolutely. Roy B67, best art school going. Thank you very much. So I think you've already asked. We've answered the next question, which is what made you apply to the university. But in order to progress your graphic novel and take that forward, what have been the highlights of studying at the university? I think you've gone quiet there. You've muted yourself, or have you got a mute button on your headset? No, we're just getting. I'm not getting any sound at all. Okay, bear with us a second. What we'll do is, I'll hit the be right back screen and we'll sort out our technical issues and then we'll be right back. So while you wait, certainly put some comments in the chat, ask your questions, and we'll get to those when we come back. Okay, so we are back. Again, it would be a live stream if we didn't have technical issues. So, because my archos put Mayday, Mayday. Okay, great. So just go back to the question that I asked you before. What's been the highlights of studying at the university? We've gone again. Okay. Let's give it 2 seconds and we would be right back again. There you go. All new headset.
Sorry, everyone. Headset's playing up.
All right. So the question that I've got for you is what's been the highlights of studying at the university? We will get this question.
Better be good now. Yeah, it's the biggest highlight has been the new friends that I've made. It's a very diverse group that are doing the MA. The course takes in people doing all sorts of different disciplines, and it's really lovely being able to see everyone weekly and talk about what we're doing and get new insights on our own work and give insights on each other's work. So we've got a real lovely friendship group now, and that I think has been the biggest highlight for me, because I am quite an introvert normally. I don't tend to make friends easily, but I do feel like I've got a lot of new friends and a lot more confidence as well to talk, not just about my art, but just to people generally.
Would you have thought you'd have been doing something like this if before you started the course?
No, definitely not. I was way too shy to do something like this before.
That's great. I mean, that's always good to hear. Dandy Mia has put in the chat, "Oh, we love you," and we've been inspired by you too.
Oh,
So
that's
there
so
you go.
lovely.
So and then how have you found studying just in general? Obviously, we've got issues with the pandemic and whatever else. And do you think that has sort of held you back in any way, or do you think that learning some of the stuff online and stuff has been helpful?
I actually really enjoy learning online, because if I miss something or I misunderstand something in one of the lectures, I can go back and listen to recordings. And although we're not seeing each other face to face, we can still have the discussions about it.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also got that material to refer to later. I am one of the lucky ones because I've got all my own equipment to work from home. I've got my laptop and I've got the PC and tablet, that kind of thing. I know it's been a lot harder for some of the more practical makers on the
Yeah.
course to do it in a lockdown. Um, but I think being in a lockdown has definitely helped me, because before I was doing anything but art on some days. I'd get out just for an excuse to be out the house. And with being stuck in, it means I've really had to sit down and concentrate and actually pay attention to doing my artwork.
Cool. Okay, it's great. Um, and so we'll move off talking about studying in university and things like that. So The next couple of questions I'm going to ask is more about your artwork and stuff, in terms of like what made you get into illustration.
I think it was just a natural progression for me. I did my degree in fine art, and when I left uni, I didn't really do much with it. I did a few craft fairs and did a few open exhibitions for galleries, that kind of thing. But because of the genre I was interested in, which was fantasy art, it's a lot harder to get people in the kind of more serious art world to take you seriously as a fantasy artist.
Yeah.
I think they all think it's a bit naff. So I decided that I was going to start illustrating instead, because that was what I really loved doing. I loved drawing video game characters or myths and legends, things like that. So yeah, it was just a really natural progression for me, and having the skills I learned in the fine art degree, like figure drawing and life drawing, I think they really underpin my kind of basic level of illustration.
Yeah, absolutely. I always feel that life drawing is absolutely essential for illustrators, comic artists, animators, game artists, whatever form of art you're in, because proportions and things like that is sort of absolute key.
Exactly.
We've got a comment from Holly. Since doing the original art degree, how has your art evolved? And then in brackets, Sally is trying to persuade me to ask silly questions, but I'm being sensible. I'm assuming you'll know what that
I
means.
know exactly who those two are. Yeah, troublemakers. I think I've got a lot more confidence with my art. My character drawing has evolved massively. For a long time, I was only able to draw very stiff looking characters, not really so much with dynamic poses. But yeah, so it's learning and constantly practicing. So I've taught myself and had lessons on how to draw things in a more dynamic and interesting way.
Well, Holly, I hope that answered your question there. In terms of your inspiration and things like that, you talked about you're currently putting together a graphic novel. Do you read graphic novels? Is that something that you're interested in?
Not as many as I probably should, with it being something I want to create more regularly.
Yeah.
I've got a few graphic novels that I absolutely love, but they come from video games. So Mass Effect, Dragon Age, those kind of graphic novels. I've also got some really cool kind of historical ones. So I've got a Robin Hood one and a Beowulf one that I read regularly.
Cool.
And things like the Dark Tower graphic novels. So yeah, I do love reading them, but not as much as I probably could do.
It's sometimes it's one of them, isn't it? It's kind of like when you get the time. If you're constantly making art and stuff like that, then it's trying to fit everything in, isn't it? It's having that sort of work-life balance as well.
Yeah.
I think some people have really struggled with that during the lockdown, and whatever else is just trying to switch off at the end of the day and doing something different.
Yeah.
So the graphic novels that you are reading, I mean, in terms of rated to games and stuff, that's been a huge sort of boost lately. Games companies producing the graphic novels to accompany, or the pre-story or whatever else. So
yeah,
there's definitely future going forward. I mean, graphic novels is always, for me, it's always been big, and I can't see it going anywhere anytime soon. And then this sort of style that you've got coming off now, would you say that you were influenced by things like Lord of the Rings as well, or is that?
Absolutely. My human character that I'm working on now, he was very much inspired by the kind of characters like Aragorn, Boromir, Faramir. And Lord of the Rings is one of my absolute favourite books. I actually started listening to it on audiobook recently because I just don't have time to sit and reread it. So it's been really lovely to kind of listen to that while I'm working and kind of get inspired again by the characters.
Absolutely, yeah, that's it's good. I mean, the amount of people now that are sort of switched over to audiobooks, just finding the time to read and that sort of stuff. It can be tricky.
Yeah.
Like I say, if you can do it while you're creating your artwork as well. I know Dan from last week said that he listened to a lot of podcasts while he was working as well. So yeah, great. So the typical question: what age did you start drawing?
Very, very young. I maybe 2 or 3, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It started when my mum took me to early learning, and I don't even think that exists anymore, does it? Showing my age there. Yeah, mum took me to early learning and bought me finger paints, and I think I just knocked my camera, and things like that. So yeah, I started really young.
And how often would you say you draw? I mean, I know you're doing your artwork and stuff like that, but for fun or for anything else, how often would you say you?
Before I started doing the masters, it was every other day. Doing the masters now, every single day.
Yeah. So is that like an hour or two, or 8 hours, or what are we talking in terms of?
It's 8 hours, 8 to 12 hours a day, every day.
Because I mentioned this in the last few podcasts as well, in terms of, students come to me all the time and say, "Oh, I can't draw," or and it's usually a confidence thing, and they say to me, "Oh, I'm not." How I say, they say, "How often do you draw?" And it's very much "Oh, I don't, because I can't." So I think would you say the more you draw, the better you become? Or?
Definitely. I don't believe that art is a skill that you can't learn. I think artists learn all their lives, otherwise there'd be no point in continuing to create. So I don't believe that people can't draw. It's just that they haven't had a chance to sit down and practice it. And there's so many tutorials, either as books or online these days, that it's really easy to learn to draw something really basic, and then from there it's just a case of practicing and pushing yourself to learn newer things.
Great. And Dandy Mears put, "You never sleep." So and again, everyone is a mark maker.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's something that we do get the first years to do now, or the level 4s when they start with us, is for visual communication, is start mark making, and just sort of breaking down that white space on a piece of paper and making marks.
Exactly. And having a white piece of paper I understand it can be really daunting. I absolutely hate starting new sketchbooks, or even just opening up a blank page on Photoshop. It can be really difficult. But yeah, I think just making marks, I tend to do a little doodle in the corner if I'm stuck for inspiration. And once you've started and you've kind of spoiled that paper by drawing something on it, it becomes a lot easier to just get into drawing then.
Do you keep a sketchbook? Like a small sort of A5 sketchbook? Do you carry that around, or is that a...
I have a lot of sketchbooks. My husband says too many. But yeah, I've got a couple of different sketchbooks. So I've got a small one that I've just started for kind of doing inspiration for my characters. I've got one that I try to take out with me to do life drawing. And I've got some more based in the kind of fantasy kind of environment drawings as well. So yeah, I've got a huge stack of sketchbooks.
Can never have too many sketchbooks, surely.
Exactly.
Would you say you were more a traditional artist or a digital artist? It's kind of a weird question to ask when you're sitting here doing digital art, but I mean, you did just say that you keep a lot of sketchbooks. So which would you say you were?
I think I've transitioned more into digital art just because of doing the MA and doing the graphic novel. I was very much set on doing it digitally, just to make life a bit easier for myself when it comes to putting backgrounds in and things like that. But yeah, until I started doing the MA, I was very much a traditional artist. So it's kind of, I don't know if I'm one or the other. I kind of just switch between the two.
Great. And I mean, what you're doing right now, are you doing that with a mouse and a keyboard?
No, I have it's a Wacom Cintiq tablet that I'm using, and it comes with this they call it a pen, but it's really lightweight, really comfortable to use. It's like drawing with a kind of rotary pencil.
Okay. But I mean, that was a loaded question straight away. I knew exactly that you weren't using a keyboard and a mouse. I think you would actually be. I'm not sure if anyone has done that since the invention of the mouse. I think
Exactly.
kind of a really difficult thing to do. So if people are watching this who have never done digital drawing before or anything else, it's definitely something that you need to invest in. Is even if it's just a small sort of entry range Intuos tablet to get yourself started. It's great. So at the moment you're doing all the shadows and shading. Is there a particular set of brushes that you use for that you've either downloaded or acquired?
No, and I probably should have. I use the very basic brushes. So the one I always use is the soft round brush that responds to the pressure of the tablet. That is what I sketch everything out in. It's what I draw everything out in, and then it's what I use to add the shading as well. I know there's so many amazing brushes out there, but because I'm not going for realism with my characters and they're more stylized, I don't feel like I need to kind of sit and search for good hair brushes or skin textures or anything like that, because it's just not what I want for my characters as they are.
So I think you can really sort of go down the rabbit hole of brushes. Really,
exactly.
I know I've lost countless hours just looking for a good sort of writing brush. I finally found one that was like a fountain pen. That I spent hours and hours just searching for it. But yeah, there's so many great brushes out there. But if what works best for you is what you should use, I suppose.
Yeah,
take
exactly.
Away from that.
Yeah, and I find looking for brushes a really daunting task as well, because like it's so difficult to find things that you would necessarily want that are on reputable websites. I find sometimes you find a brush that looks good and it takes you to some dingy, weird looking website, and I'm so worried about getting viruses and things like that. So obviously there are plenty of reputable places to get them from, but I just feel like it's just a really, really daunting task.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You definitely need to make sure that you go into reputable places. I know that there's so many brushes on DeviantArt and the likes, and Adobe have got their own sets as well in their marketplace and whatever else nowadays. So there's so many that you can get, and it's always worth asking other people what they're using. And then that's when you can bring in your links and whatever else and share. So what's been your favourite aspect about working on this particular graphic novel?
It's getting to know the characters and kind of developing them and giving them a life of their own. I can't claim that I've completely given them a life of their own by myself. I'm inspired by so many external influences, and like I have no idea where the story is actually going to take me. I'm just kind of trying to let it flow naturally, so I quite like getting surprised by how the characters might react when I'm writing it, and that probably sounds really weird to someone who doesn't write. They probably think that writers tend to plan everything out and they know exactly where their stories are going, but I find that doesn't work for me particularly. I like that element of surprise because that's what makes it interesting for me.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of external influences, what would you say they were?
There's all sorts of things. So kind of the books I read, the audiobooks, TV and films, things you see happening in everyday life, like watching a random couple having an argument as they go down the street, things like that, because I'm really nosy as well. So I like kind of seeing how people react to one another, how they react to strangers, that kind of thing. So yeah, the inspiration comes from so many different places. I couldn't possibly kind of reel them all off.
Yeah, that's kind of, again, I mean, some of these questions are pretty loaded in terms of knowing where they're going, and it's We always say travel broadens the mind and stuff, and that doesn't
Exactly.
necessarily mean that you've got to go to Bora Bora or whatever else. It could just be a walk to the shops.
Yeah,
It could just be
absolutely.
a bus ride. It could be as simple as standing in your garden for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so Roy B67 has asked, how far ahead do you write the story?
Not very far. I know what's going to happen in the next chapter, roughly. I've got
Mm-hmm.
the main sort of the bones of that sort of written out. But that's about it. I know the general kind of arc of the story and where it might go eventually. But again, as I write it, that could change. Something that comes into my mind next week might change the entire outcome of the story. So I don't
Yeah.
plan too far ahead because I find then it becomes a bit of a drag. The writing gets boring, and yeah, there's no kind of surprises with it.
It's kind of like, do you remember though? I don't know what they were called, but there's the books that you used to read, and then you get to the end of the chapter and it'd say, go to chapter 67 if you like.
The choose your own
Yeah,
adventure books.
if
Yeah.
you want to kick the rock down the street, that's it. Choose your own adventure books.
Yeah.
So I suppose when it gets to that point and you've drawn that panel, it's like, what am I going to choose next?
Exactly. Yeah.
Kiss My Nachos put, do you have an all-time favorite character that you've created?
I do. It's this guy that I'm working on currently. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he started off as a kind of obnoxious prince, but the more time I spend kind of working on his character and writing his story, um, the more I kind of love writing about him because he's become less of an obnoxious kind of spoiled character.
Mm-hmm.
He's still very sure of himself, and he's still got the kind of attitude that comes with um, the power, but in a less obnoxious, hateful kind of way. So I just think he's quite an interesting character for me personally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because you said that at the beginning of the graphic novel was about sort of empowering a female lead and things like that, and you've gravitated towards the male character within the story.
Yeah, it's strange, and I think it is because he's a secondary character
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like I've got more freedom with him in that way.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's the lead character. She is pushing the story and driving the story. So I feel like she has to react in certain ways to move the story on. But with him, he's kind of taken along for the ride a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I put a new layer in there, did I? No. So yeah, I just think he's quite an interesting character. Obviously, I love my female character, but he is definitely my favourite.
So, Kiss My Nachos, but sounds like he's been through an amazing character development.
I hope so, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that leads us on to we've asked the questions, the favourite elements. So, what's been your least favourite part of working on this graphic novel?
The repeating backgrounds. I struggle to draw lots of things. I told you this when I was doing the animation. I struggle to draw the same thing over and over again. It's partly why I did it digitally, because I can just copy and paste a background in.
Yeah.
So I've got this one background that I've used for the rest of the graphic novel, which I can just slap in, and it's like a pre-made background. And I can edit it. There's a few more trees that need to go in between and some other things going on, but that is the basic background, because I really hate drawing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, it's kind of an animator's thing, that, isn't it? Drawing things over and over again. Because when you came to me and you said that I'm gonna do an animation of these characters, and they're so detailed, and there's so much shading on it, and it was just like, wow, that's a big task for your first animation, but you did it, and it worked. So if anyone wants to see that animation, certainly head over to Emma's Instagram and website to check that out. But I mean, how long was it in the end? It was a couple of seconds?
I
But
think
it's
overall it's 7 seconds, but it took me 4 months to do it.
7
So,
seconds
yeah.
in 4 months,
Yeah.
and I mean, but it is so detailed. So from the shadows to, I mean, most animators would have just absolutely cut corners. Well, you've only got to look at the sort of remake of Thundercats of how much they cut corners.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. D Murray 87's put a high M.
Hi.
Dandy Mia has put, that's really great, and so were you to stick at it. I mean, yeah, it was no mean feat at all.
No, that was one of the toughest things I've ever done. Animation did not come naturally to me at all. So it's definitely something I want to keep working on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's taken a bit of a backseat for now, so I can get the graphic novel done.
There's so many more illustrators nowadays that are sort of doing animations and things as well, like sort of animated GIFs, even down to animated comics. We've seen a lot more of that nowadays too, where it starts off with a couple of static panels and then the last panel could be animated or whatever else. That's certainly something that we're trying to get more into as a university as well, is including some animation into the illustration programs.
Yeah, I think that would
and
be...
vice versa as well, because obviously being able to do this kind of thing, digital drawing, whatever else, for animators is so valuable.
Yeah, definitely. I think they fit so well together, because I think a lot of the demographic that read graphic novels and watch animations or play games, they're all a lot of them are the same.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really interesting way to kind of go with the course.
So, in terms of what you're doing right now, how do you know to put that shadow there? Is that just something that you see and you like it, or?
Yeah, it's something I've learned over the years. When I did my fine art course, I spent a summer teaching myself to draw figures, because before I started that I couldn't really do it very well.
Yeah.
So I sat down with a copy of Kerrang and I drew all of the rock stars in it over and over again, and I think that's where my hatred of drawing the same thing over and over again came from. And it's just looking at reference photographs was a huge help for me to see where the shadows fall, where the light falls, and how they contrast, and how it gives the character shape. So the hair's probably not the best example for this, but it gives him more of a shape by having the light on one side, and then the deeper shadows on the other side.
Great. So when you're talking about light sources and things like that, do you try and determine where your light source is coming from before you start
I do.
adding shadows and stuff, or?
I do, yeah. So if I show you the graphic novel itself, so obviously that's the one I'm working on currently. If I scroll up through it, the light source is coming in a certain direction in the forest, and I'm trying to stick with that so it's coherent through the whole section of this story. So I haven't done it on this image, but normally there's a big yellow arrow that I draw in, that shows the direction that the light's coming from.
And I mean, you're obviously thinking about perspective and things like that as well. Do you use reference photographs, or?
I do,
is it
yeah.
just something straight from?
No, I try to use reference photographs whenever I can. Even if it's just for really basic poses. Obviously, the characters never look anything like the reference photographs, but it's just to get the shapes and the sizes and the perspective right. So I have a Pinterest feed which has got about 10,000 images on it, and it's all just characters, either images of people doing martial arts training or sword fighting, archery, anything like that, just so I've got all of these different poses that I can refer to.
Great. We've got a comment here from Kiss My Artichoke. My hate for drawing the same thing over and over again was back in college when they had me drawing onions and cans. The classic, isn't it? The classic sort of tins and onions and different objects. I think I got to try when I started doing my degree and stuff like that. It was you got to pick two objects, and I think I picked a padlock and like a rubber or something like that. It was really by the time I never wanted to see another padlock again.
I know, yeah. Ours was peppers that we had to draw
Yeah,
over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. Not good. Oh, what style of drawing would you say you use?
I don't know how I would define it, to be honest. I'm not sure. I try to stay more stylized. I used to do very realistic drawings.
Yeah.
But again, the monotony of that kind of got a bit boring. So I had more difficulty doing that. So yeah, I try to keep it stylized, more in line with the kind of more arty kind of graphic novels that are out there, I hope.
Yeah, it's kind of almost cel shaded, isn't it? Kind of like
Yeah.
Borderlands esque style.
Yeah.
Not sure if there's an actual official terminology for that. I'm sure if
No,
someone
I don't know.
knows that in the comments, then certainly let us know what that is. But yeah, it's kind of like a realistic cel shaded style.
Yeah.
We'll just come up with our own until we find out what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the great thing about art, that you can always make up your own phrases for the styles.
Yeah.
Because even if it does conform to one style, there's always going to be something slightly different about it and slightly unexpected.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the next question I've got for you, I think we sort of touched on that in terms of influences. Of what influences these sort of things through Lord of the Rings and whatever else. Just to sort of throw the cat amongst the pigeons there, which is your favourite Lord of the Rings film?
The Fellowship of the Ring, definitely. I love the way the characters are kind of introduced, and I know there was a lot of kind of moaning about they'd missed huge parts of the story out. But I just like the way that the world is set up. I think that's the most interesting part of the films for me. It's how the characters are set up and how they relate to each other and their motivations for doing or not doing something.
So my thing with the Fellowship was they end on a rock, and that really annoyed me.
Yeah.
They just finish on a rock, and that's it.
Yeah.
I've got a few students in on the master's program that sort of are well into Lord of the Rings, and I always say that The Hobbit's my favourite, and they're not happy about that.
I very much do love the Hobbit films as well. Yeah, I'm a big fan of those. But yeah, I think Lord of the Rings is kind of the OG fantasy for me. It was the first book I read kind of in the fantasy genre, and yeah, it was the first kind of fantasy film I kind of watched and fell in love with.
So it'd be interesting for us to see in people who are watching is certainly throw into the chat which film is your favourite out of the series. Let's see if we can get that debate going. And in terms of time it takes to create something like this, how long would it take to create one panel, one page, or how long is it going to take you to create the cover for this graphic novel?
It really varies depending on how many different images are in the page. So this one, I could probably have it done in maybe 2 days of work if I really put my mind to it and get on with it. For some of the other ones where I've got to draw lots of different poses, because I'm trying to keep that continuity of quality, it could take me a week or longer sometimes with the more complicated ones.
When you say like a day or a week, are you talking 8 hours or an hour a day, or?
No, it's at least 8 hours a day. I'm very lucky that with doing the masters, I don't have to work as well. My husband was like, no, if you're going to do the masters, do it properly. don't worry about having to work and things like that. So yeah, I've been really lucky that I do get to spend all my time doing this.
That's really good. Yeah, because it's kind of yeah, I suppose that's a really good support network you've got there.
Yeah.
And we've got a comment from Holly saying fellowship all day long.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And in terms of doing this graphic novel, would you say which bit's going to be? I mean, have you considered putting a cover together, or is it just going to be an extract from the graphic novel, or is it going to be a full graphic novel? Or
well, depending on time, it's going to be a full graphic novel. I'm really struggling with the cover, and I'm hoping that if I keep working, eventually I'll come up with an image from the story that will do what I want it to do. The one it's got at the moment for the kind of working cover is kind of a half and half portrait of my main character when she's clean and when she's been through a battle. I'm not sure if I'll keep that, but yeah, that's what I've kind of got at the moment, and that took me 2 or 3 days to do.
Well, okay. So would you prefer to do like the panels or the actual cover, or like one big piece or lots of little pieces?
Oh, one big piece, definitely. I much prefer having a lot going on in the one image rather than having to do lots and lots of little images. But obviously, that's not how graphic novels work. So it's having that balance between the really big double-page spreads and the much smaller kind of panels.
So we've got a comment from D Murray 87. Well done, Mark. Got to do what you love, Em.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you'll know what that means.
I do. Yeah.
So there's been an influx of web comics and over the past few years. Would you say that you prefer to read a physical sort of graphic novel or a web comic?
I love a good proper book. I find it really difficult even to read things on Kindle, things like that. I don't know, there's just something about having a physical book, and I think that's why I still work in sketchbooks, even though I'm doing a lot of digital work now. I just love a proper book.
Yeah, I mean, I've known a few employers and stuff in the game industry and whatever else, and they always say that they do like to see a good sketchbook.
Yeah.
I suppose a physical book sometimes. It's nice to keep on your shelf, obviously, once the collection grows and it can become quite a sort of contagious thing. They tend to multiply on your shelf, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And they're art pieces in themselves then, aren't they? So yeah, books all the way.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I think we might have answered this one already, but how do you come up with your narrative and your character ideas? We sort of, it's been on about influences and things like that. I think I might have repeated this question a little bit because it's so far down the list. We're sort of really rattling through these questions.
Most of my ideas come to me when I can't sleep. I have terrible insomnia. So I have a lot of trouble sleeping, and my mind tends to fire up when I go to bed. Lying in a dark room for some reason really sets me off thinking, and like I keep my phone by the bed so I can make all these little notes. I'm gonna have to get myself a dictaphone so I can say them without having to think about typing them at 3 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, a lot of them come to me like that, just in quiet moments, or if there's a quiet moment where we're sat watching TV, somebody might say something that we're in something we're watching, and that could trigger some inspiration for an interaction between some of my characters.
So I mean, the next thing I was going to say might spark a bit of a deep conversation in terms of, quite a lot of people I know, artists and whatever else, do suffer from insomnia. Would you say that is an artist's plight, or is that just something that having a creative mind keeps you awake at night? Or
yeah, having a creative mind definitely keeps you awake at night, I think. I think in those quiet moments when everyone else is sleeping, you've got sort of time to think about things for yourself, even if you don't want it. And yeah, I think it's definitely an artist plight, and yeah, a lot of people I know suffer from it as well, who work in creative industries. I think that just comes as part and parcel of our character.
So what you're saying is that the creative industry should switch to nights.
I don't know. I think we'd still have trouble sleeping if we did that.
Can't sleep in the day. It's too light.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's too much noise.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got D Murray 87. Can't beat a real book or sketchbook to draw in. Still got artwork he did for me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the nice thing about it. You can, if people are interested in bits out of your sketchbook, I have been known to do it in the past, and it's ruining perfectly good books. But you just rip it out and hand it off to them, you know, and they've got a nice piece of artwork, and your art's getting out there in the world somewhere for someone else to enjoy.
Or what you should do is sell them the entire sketchbook for like a premium.
Yeah, I never thought of that though.
You couldn't possibly destroy this sketchbook. You need this entire piece, and it'll cost you this much money.
Yeah. Top tip: do that from now on.
Roy B67, Insomnia, my constant companion.
Yeah.
Because my artichokes put, the world looks and sounds different at night, and I think it definitely aids creativity.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, some of the best ideas come at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Some of my worst ideas have also come at that time in some sort of delirium, but yeah, mostly good ideas, I think.
Excuse me. So in terms of you just mentioned sketchbooks there, ripping pages out your sketchbook, the sacrilege, and so this leads us on to the next bit. Do you take on commissions?
I do indeed. I recently did a commission for a friend of her player character from the Dragon Age series. That was a really fun one to do because I'm a huge fan of Dragon Age as well. But I've also done pet portraits, family portraits, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm open to any kind of commissions. Not to say for work, I'll do that happily as well. So, you know, anything like that.
I think Holly Lou said that has put me in there. So
Yeah.
biggest client right there, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone is watching who is interested in commissions, what would be the best way to get in touch with you right now in order to secure their next artwork from your next piece of art?
Yeah, either on my website, that my email address is on there, or they can fill in a form that will email to me directly, or DM me on Instagram as well. Any of those ways is absolutely fine.
Go, and I posted it in the chat as well again, so your website. So I think when I first posted it, it was back right at the very top of the chat. So just as a reminder for everybody right there. Go. So if anyone does have any questions, certainly fire them into the chat. You know, we can. Emma's here to answer those questions, especially if there's anything that she's doing right now that interests you, or that you're not sure about, or would like to improve your own artwork, or just general sort of everyday questions. We're probably going to start moving on to the more sort of conversations about hobbies and things like that shortly. So if it's art related, then certainly fire a question into the chat, because my next set of questions is going to be sort of what we talked about already in terms of movies and stuff, but things like that you do in your spare time in terms of games that you play, movies, TV shows and things like that. So what would you say would be, I know you play video games, what's your favourite game?
That's really difficult. If you'd have asked me a month ago, it would have been Dragon Age or Mass Effect, but now it's Ghost of Tsushima. That was my favourite game that came out last year, and I think possibly my favourite game of all time now. I really love the storytelling in that, and the fact that it was made reminiscent of old samurai movies. There's just something incredibly cool about the way they've done it, and it just seems like a really new, interesting idea.
Yeah, I've played it myself recently, off the recommendation of another student actually, from the masters, and it is. I mean, it's made such an impact that. There's rumours that Assassin's Creed are going to try and replicate it. The leaders, I'm not sure what sort of leadership they have on Tsushima, but they've given the writers and producers and everything else citizenship. I made them honorary sort of tourism. I'm not sure what you'd call it. Awards.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely beautiful game. So that's a huge recommendation for me as well. In terms of, if you haven't played it, definitely go and play it. If you're into video games, that is. And I mean,
absolutely.
The fact that you can switch it to play in the style of an old samurai
Kurosawa movie. Yeah.
It's kind of, it really is such a well done game.
Yeah, and it's so stylish, really beautiful, and the combat is really good fun. I love going into ghost mode and scaring the bejesus out of Mongols. There's something really satisfying, which probably says a lot more about me than anything. But
yeah, it is, and it just came straight out of left field as well, in terms of, you know, 1 minute it just appeared. Yeah. And then it definitely deserves Game of the Year. It's kind of really good.
Definitely. Yeah.
Really good. A game changer, no less.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I still love Dragon Age and Mass Effect for the kind of the RPGs and the huge spanning stories. I will always love those, and I'm so excited for the Mass Effect remaster.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ghost of Tsushima, it was such a pleasant surprise from a really awful year. Yeah, I just replayed it and I fell in love with it all over again.
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know. It's just one of them, isn't it? It's just an instant classic. It was a bit like, for me, a bit like Witcher 3.
Yeah.
I didn't play the other two Witchers. I played Witcher 3 straight in. That's probably a controversial thing to say on a Twitch stream, but yeah, it went straight into 3, and it was just blew me away. And it was kind of like, and I think that's where Ghost of Tsushima came from as well. Just absolutely straight from
definitely.
Straight from left field.
I mean, yeah, I love The Witcher as well. For my we had to do a masterpiece presentation in the first year of the course, and The Witcher was my chosen game for being a masterpiece. I really love that game, but I've just started listening to the books as audiobooks, and I much prefer the characters in the books to the game, which is probably a very controversial thing to say as well.
I mean, the show on Netflix is trying to stick more to the books, isn't it? So
yeah, I found a lot of differences with that, though. Even though it's trying to stick closer to the books, there are a lot of differences as well. I mean, I won't say what, because I don't want to spoil anything. I'm quite far through the books now. But yeah, I think it's really interesting how, even though they're the same story, they've kind of developed a life of their own, and they have taken them occasionally in a slightly different direction.
It's a bit like forgotten it now. The George R. Martin. What's the
Game of Thrones?
Yeah, right on the I was about to say Game of Thrones, and it just went straight out of my head. I read the first book of Game of Thrones, and it was very similar to the TV show. But I didn't read the next ones because it was such a massive book. It took me ages to read, and I do like a short chat book that I can just rattle through. So Holly's put, as someone who loves BioWare games, how is it you keep choosing the worst BioWare romance options?
I knew this question would be coming if I mentioned Dragon Age or Mass Effect. We argue on the regs about the best romance options. Probably better that we don't get into it now.
Okay. Let's quickly move on. So, in terms of TV shows, I mean, we mentioned The Witcher and things like that. So, any other TV shows that you?
Obviously, I watch Game of Thrones. A lot. We watch a lot of stuff on Netflix, and to be honest, a lot of it is rubbish. But there's nothing I've really watched recently because I've been so busy doing this, and in my downtime, I've been playing games. So yeah, there's nothing I've really watched recently, to be honest, apart from The Witcher again. I watched that. I binge watched it while I was working last week, but that's it.
it's kind of one of them things with lockdown and everything else. It was like Netflix completed it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's kind of it does that, doesn't it? There's sort of like peaks at the time where there's like loads to watch, and then
Yeah.
we tend to do that. We build it up and then binge watch it all in one go.
Oh, and The Mandalorian as well. I watched that, and that was amazing. Yeah.
Brilliant. I agree with that. We're currently on the Marvel stuff, so we watched all of WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldiers. So our newest thing. So that is a must every week. I mean, it comes to that point now where you sort of. I much prefer binging stuff because I hate waiting.
I know, me too. Yeah.
And I think that's what annoyed me about Fellowship finishing on a rock, because
Yeah.
I had to then wait. I had to wait like 12 months to watch the next one.
Yeah.
So obviously, being old and stuff like that, you see these things the first time round, so you have to wait. It's kind of like all the Marvel stuff, where you have to wait like years for this stuff. Whereas now you can just watch all like 30 odd films in one hit.
Yeah, again, show my age, but yeah, I remember went to the cinema to see Lord of the Rings when it first came out, and then did the exact same thing when the Hobbit films came out as well. So yeah.
Holly's put Wise, so I'm assuming that's from the BioWare
the romance options. Yeah.
Wow. Movies. Have we done movies? We talked. I know we talked Lord of the Rings and stuff, but is it just Lord of the Rings, or have we anything that's come out recently that's been wow, that was good?
What's come out recently? This year is such a blur. I don't even know what's come out recently. I'm really excited for the new Bond film. I absolutely love Bond films. I'm trying to think what we've watched recently. I'm not sure what we've watched movie-wise that's come out recently.
It's been weird, isn't it? Because everything either comes straight on, rent it at home, or there's not much cinema going on.
No, exactly. I think the last thing I saw in the cinema was probably one of the Marvel. I think it might have been
Endgame or something.
Endgame, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that was probably the last thing we seen at the cinema as well, as Endgame. So, let's jump straight. Well, we've sort of covered all the hobbies and influences and things like that. So, let's talk a little bit more now about your artwork and stuff. So, you've worked on the hair. You're now working on this. So, what are you doing now? It's all shading and shadows now, or?
Yeah, so I'm just putting a very simple layer of shading. There'll probably be 2 or 3 layers of shading on this character. I did used to do it so each section of clothing, so the green cloak would have different shades of green, and then the brown leather would have different shades of brown. But actually, I found it much more efficient to use a black color and change the opacity so it's really low, to give it a really nice pale grey kind of color, which it doesn't actually look any different to the shading I used to use when I was doing all the colors individually. So it means I can just go over it in one layer and see the image coming together a lot quicker than it would have done.
So in terms of you using Photoshop, how come you chose to use Photoshop?
It was the most readily available digital platform that I had. I've always had Photoshop. I haven't always had the rest of the Creative Cloud, so it was just something that I kind of knew how to use. I've sat and watched a lot of tutorials about actually drawing in Photoshop. So it was just the easiest thing I had to hand. I've tried to use Illustrator since, but it's so similar to Photoshop but not quite the same. I just get so confused with it.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah.
It's a few people have said that you just get frustrated with Illustrator. It's just one of them things that's kind of I don't know whether it's because it's vector based and you've got to draw things out with the pen tool, whereas Photoshop can be a bit more fluid. You can just literally get the paintbrush out and start painting it. It's more pixel based, but
yeah, that's what I found with it. I find vectors are very difficult because I do like to sit and really sketch things out first. I still adopt a very traditional way of drawing it, I haven't been able to get my head around doing it with vectors.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the main reason why. Yeah, I think that's it.
I think it's horses for courses, isn't it? It's kind of like, this is going to be in a graphic novel. It doesn't need to be resized to the size of a billboard or anything else. I suppose if you're going to do an individual piece for advertising, then maybe look into vectorizing it, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah.
Because I know quite a lot of the illustrators now on the courses, especially comic artists, moving into Clip Studio. Is that something that you've looked into? Or?
Obviously I've seen Clip Studio around, but I haven't really tested it out at all. I know you can get a couple of months free with it to test it out.
Yeah.
But because I feel like I'm on such a short time limit to get this work done,
yeah, of course.
It's something I'll probably look at after the Masters. We were having a discussion today and people were like, oh, we've got loads of time, we've got 4 months. And I'm quietly having a panic attack in the corner because I've started on my final piece and I've got a plan to do so many pages with it, and 4 months doesn't seem like a lot to me. But I just think that's the nature of the differences in our working and styles and our disciplines.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it is a completely different way of working, isn't it, compared to someone who's using acrylic paints or whatever else. But because I've noticed just in the difference of what you're doing and the way you're working is really different to artists that I've seen sort of digital painting in the past. I mean, you seem to be sort of really spending the time sort of colouring that in and getting the colours down, whereas somebody else will just use a paint bucket and throw it on quick and then edit it after. So it's...
I haven't worked out a way to get my paint bucket to fill without leaving a gap between the paintbrush and the bucket yet. So I prefer to do it this way because it really winds me up if I have to go back into it and do it. And I like to kind of do editing at the absolute minimum if I can. So I like to try and get it right first time. I've always been like that with it. So
that could be the traditionalist coming through.
Maybe
it's that kind of get it right the first time, because we don't want to be sort of having to erase stuff or paint over stuff or whatever else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right there. It's probably because I used to work a lot in acrylic paints, and you have to get it right because you can't just work back into it when it's wet, like with oils, because it dries so quickly. So yeah, it's a case of got to get it right the first time. And I haven't really been able to get away from that yet because working in Photoshop is still fairly new to me.
So I mean, would you say working with acrylics was harder or
Definitely.
The digital?
Yeah, definitely. My favorite thing about digital is having everything on a different layer, so if I do mess it up catastrophically, I can just delete that layer and the rest of the piece isn't ruined. There's always that fear when I am painting with acrylics that a paintbrush in the wrong place could ruin the whole effect. So there's always that worry with painting, but I find that it's not so much of a problem doing it digitally, as long as I remember to actually put a new layer on.
And I think that's key, isn't it? We talked about this, digital artists and stuff. Just remembering to put those new layers in all the time, because it can sort of really mess up your piece.
Exactly.
When you've got to go back and then delete it and whatever else. So it's tricky. So, if top tips for anyone watching right now, what would you, if someone's out there and they want to move away from acrylic and they want to get into digital art, what would you say would be the top tip that you would give to that person?
Get a reasonably cheap tablet that will allow you to draw on it. I would look at the Wacom stuff. That's what I've always used. You can get reasonably good ones. They don't have to have a screen on them. It is a new discipline, learning to draw on one kind of panel, as it were, and look at a screen, but it's you can pick it up quite quickly. So get a fairly cheap tablet and just practice. It's just time that is all it really takes to learn to do it digitally. Look up tutorials on YouTube and things like that. So if you are getting stuck, and practice every day. Still keep drawing. Keep a sketchbook close by. Take it out with you, and just do something every day.
Yeah, because I mean, I think when we talk to students about going from traditional to digital, and then they go out and they buy a little Intuos tablet, the hardest thing I always found the hardest thing was you've got to take your eyes away from the end of your pencil.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, sort of, it becomes disjointed that you've got this pen going off one side, and you're looking at a screen which is completely the opposite direction to your hand. So I struggle with that personally. So that's why I use a screen base, and there is quite a few options out there now, from the X Pen to Huions and things like that. So you don't necessarily have to go down a Wacom route if you just start.
No, exactly. Yeah, I only said, obviously not sponsored by it, but I only say it because that is like what
if we keep saying it, we might get sponsorship.
You never know, yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. You know, it's what most people would recommend is the Wacom series.
Yeah.
But to start anything off, you should always start off as cheaply as possible.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
It might not be for you. We've got a comment from Rita11 I've really enjoyed watching and hearing this, but I have to leave now. Well done, Emma.
Aww.
There you go. So, in terms of this scene, at the moment, have we got a name for these characters, by the way?
Yep. So the character I'm working on currently, he is Tristan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the pink-haired elf, the main character, her name is, and I always get this wrong, I can't say my own character's name, it's Felisandariel, because I wanted a really complicated elf name.
How do you spell
that? I can show you.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Ta-da! So, there we go.
There you go. So how did you come up with these names?
Tristan kind of harks back to really traditional English boys' names. And I really loved Shakespeare, his version of Tristan and Isolde. It's just a really old traditional name that I really love. And Felisandariel, I started with the name Fliss, and I was going like down the lines of Felicity because that's what Fliss comes from, but it didn't sound elfish enough, so I just sat and scribbled loads of words and letters down on a piece of paper until I came up with something that was not necessarily easy to say because I like elf names to be complicated, but that made sense.
So in terms of, I don't know, in terms of elf lore and stuff like that, does it mean anything in particular, or?
I've written it down somewhere and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. There was, I think it was like Brave One or something like that, was the way I worked it out. And it's kind of come from looking at naming standards for other fantasy realms, so like Tolkien and Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of thing. Because obviously Tolkien is the godfather of fantasy, and a lot of the elven races in other fantasy series have kind of taken inspiration from that, so they have a lot of the kind of base roots in the language that's very similar.
And when you say Dungeons and Dragons, you don't mean the 80s cartoon where they went on a fairground ride and then came out the other side with all these cool weapons?
I mean, I do love the 80s cartoon. But no, I meant more the 5th edition book and tabletop game, which I admit I do play on a regular basis, and I absolutely love it because I'm such a nerd, but it's the most fun times I have. So yeah, if anybody's looking for something to do and they want to get involved with a group of people who are all nerds, play Dungeons and Dragons because it's so fun. You can be all sorts of different characters and you can be really horrible to everyone, and it's absolutely fine because it's your character and not you.
Brilliant. I mean, I know we've got tabletop societies and things like that
Yeah.
at the university as well. So there's quite a few sort of board games. I know people play X-Wing and all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
So it's a huge sort of scene at the moment as well in Wrexham.
Yeah, that's how I got involved with it, with the society at the uni.
Right.
Yeah, and we play every week. So yeah, it's really good fun.
So how have you done that with lockdown then? In terms of, has that been easy enough to do?
It's really complicated. We do it on
Yeah.
Discord. And the DM has little maps and things that he brings up so we can see where battles and things are going on. But I mean, it is a game played in the imagination.
Yeah.
It does make it more difficult because we're not sat next to each other, so we can't gesture as much. But it's really helpful for learning like how to describe things, because obviously people can't see what you're talking about. So it really makes you think about how you're going to describe whatever it is you're looking at, or however you're going to fight, things like that.
I mean, and when you say DM, do you mean Dungeon Master? Is that?
I do,
that
yeah. I
means?
keep forgetting people don't know the lingo. I sound like I'm talking complete nonsense.
I can imagine the world of Twitch knows a lot about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Because I know I asked that question about how do you play it. There's an advert at the moment that really annoys me about for Teams, Microsoft Teams, and they're like, oh, we're here at Monopoly and we use Teams to test out our board games. It's like Monopoly hasn't changed for the last 100 years. What are you testing?
Yeah.
So it's like, well done for using Teams to play a game that's not changed for
1,000 years, yeah.
And then even when they brought in a card machine to Monopoly, I thought, oh,
It's still the same game, basically, isn't it? We have a Zelda Monopoly. It's
Yeah.
exactly the same game, but it confuses the heck
different
out of
words,
my
yeah.
dad because all the places are different. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like, where's Pall Mall? Where's Pall Mall gone?
Yeah, exactly.
Don't know why Dad has that accent, but yeah. So yeah, let's get back to I've completely sidetracked this by talking about Monopoly and Dungeons and Dragons from the 80s cartoon. That is the animator in me rushing to the top and saying, let's talk about animation.
Yeah, to be fair, it's right up my level, so you know.
It's a fantastic cartoon back in the day. It's on par with Thundercats.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we won't talk about the remake. That just angers everybody.
Yeah, let's not.
Throw a cat right amongst the pigeons there. So in terms of working with Photoshop, and you've got all them layers there, and obviously this is your personal project, but that's starting to freak me out a little bit that you haven't named any of those layers.
Well, they are color coded, so I know which layer is which. So these top ones are the outline drawings. So the orange I know is the furthest enemy. The lilac is the main character. Green is for my human character. Yellow is for the enemy in the foreground, and red is the blood splat. And I will, as I go through.
Yeah.
So starting with this layer, I will turn that green as well. And then I know what they all are. But yeah, I know it's a nightmare if I was ever going to collaborate with anyone. But yeah, for my own personal thing, I know exactly what I'm doing with it. So
when it's for you, it's okay.
Yeah.
when you start working with this, if this graphic novel takes off and then you end up becoming the Robert Kirkman of this comic book, for Walking Dead Robert Kirkman, that is, then you kind of I think you may get shouted at.
Yeah, God help the people that are going to have to sort through my nonsense. Yeah.
So any other tips that you would say this time? I mean, you mentioned about using tablets and things like that, but is there any sort of shortcuts that you use in Photoshop, or any techniques that you use, or is it fairly straightforward?
It's fairly straightforward, I think, really. I don't know of any kind of complicated techniques that I do use. No, I can't think of any. The main thing is keep your layers separate.
Yeah.
keep them labelled, which makes most sense. Don't take my own advice on that one, but yeah, I think keeping them labelled is a really good idea. Yeah, and don't be afraid to experiment. At the end of the day, you can always undo stuff if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, just practice, experiment, download new brushes, find new ways of doing things.
And I suppose that sort of helps when you want to the layers. If you wanted to erase something, you're not taking away everything underneath it as well and leaving yourself this checkerboard effect.
Exactly, yeah. So if I wanted to erase one of the shaded layers, I can just get rid of it, and it hasn't affected the rest of the drawing at all. And if I wanted to put it back in, there it is again. So I think it's really important to keep everything on separate layers, because I've made the mistake myself in the past of thinking, oh no, that doesn't look right, and then I've drawn a shadow or a highlight directly on the base color and had to start again or blot it out, and I've ruined all the other layers of shading or something like that. So yeah, keep everything on separate layers.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing. It's kind of like the taking your eyes away from the tip of the pen, is then sort of making sure that you put everything on a new layer.
Yeah.
It's just getting into that habit of muscle memory.
Yeah.
So in terms of how you sort of plan out your work and organise everything, what's your sort of technique of deciding which frame gets drawn first? Do you plan it all out first and then go back over it and colorise everything, or?
Yeah, so I'll show you quickly on this one. This is one of the next frames I'm going to do, and it's a chaotic battle scene. So I've drawn out lots of different little frames. Hopefully it makes it look chaotic, and it kind of adds to the drama of it by having everything smaller. And what I'll do is I'll finish drawing in all of these kind of skeletal forms.
Yeah.
And then I'll go in to whichever one I like the look of. There's no real plan to it. I might think, oh, I'd like to do that one first, and then I'll do that one, and moving around doing different things. So I don't necessarily do it in order. It's just however I feel like doing it a lot of the time, which is probably again a nightmare if I was going to work with anybody else.
I think so. What is your plan for this at the end? Are you hoping to release this, or?
Yeah, so for the final show for the MA, I'm planning on having a full graphic novel. It'll come as part of a collector's pack, so it'll come bound in a pouch. There'll be other little bits of comic strip with it, hopefully, other little books that give more of an idea about the world around them. I'll have a big fold-out map, because I've also done a big digital drawing of the world map, things like that. So that will be what I'm displaying for the actual final show, and if there's interest in it, I'll hopefully go on and sell it or something like that. And there will be potentially a digital version of the graphic novel on my website as well. It's all stuff I need to research properly. But yeah, that's the plan.
Great. I mean, because that was going to be my next thing then. So you've put this all together. They could potentially a Kickstarter sort of project there to take it into production.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's definitely something I should look into.
So if anyone is interested in
Let me know.
sponsoring this or funding, certainly send a DM. So in terms of like commissions and things like that, did you get many difficult people when it comes to commissions?
No, I have been really lucky, and I know it's not always the way, but people have asked me to do a certain drawing, and they've been happy with what I've done every time. I haven't had any issues with difficult commissions. A lot of the time it's very simple commissions, so I don't have to worry about too many kind of briefs or contradicting kind of ideas. So no, I've been really lucky so far, and I'm just waiting for that really one difficult commission to come through, because
So
I'm
we've
sure it'll throw me off.
Absolutely, and I think that's a skill in itself, isn't it? Is dealing with clients and making sure that your clients are happy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Customers always right and all that sort of thing, but sometimes
Exactly.
it can
Sometimes
be tricky.
it can go too far. Yeah.
Because artwork. Your time and your skills. They're not cheap, and it's kind of you need to make sure you get that balance. And I don't think a lot of the time lifting the veil on this kind of stuff shows people how much detail goes into what it is you create, and it certainly adds more value to it.
Yeah, definitely.
We've got a couple of comments. Kiss My Art Joke says, sounds like it'll be a great collector's item. And D Murray 87 says, sounds amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Now that you've sort of had your first taste of a live stream, hopefully it's not been too painful. We haven't put you through the mill too much. Technical issues aside, now you need a new headset.
Yep.
Is this something that you'll consider taking forward? Is actually starting your own stream?
Maybe. I'm always scared that there's no interest for it and people won't watch and it'll be a waste of time, but I've really enjoyed doing it. So yeah, maybe it is something I could do on a more regular basis, particularly once the novel's kind of out there in the world. If people want to see how the next one is coming along and things like that, that would be really interesting, maybe.
Yeah, I think just since we've started doing this, we've got this is only our third stream. People are interested. People seem to be interested. I'm sure if I said in the comments now, if people who are watching, if you think Emma should certainly start her own live stream, and when you'd watch that, then certainly throw a comment in. But it is kind of people will sort of gravitate and watch you working and stuff, even if because right now you're doing this as part of your project, so you're not actually you're not wasting your time or anything. You're doing it anyway. So what you're doing is lifting the lid on how you're doing it, and people pick up tips and tricks and whatever else. So people will sort of. So we've got a couple of comments, and Holly's put, "Yay, so excited! We've moved on to the protagonist. I love her hair." And then also said, "Definitely, but there would be silly questions."
That's okay. I'm used to it.
If you do have any silly questions right now, as long as they're appropriate for work and whatever else, then certainly feel free to stick those in the comment section. It's always better to laugh than it is to sit here and be sort of like monotone and be like, right, so how have you done this piece of work here? It's kind of like, I'd rather be laughing than sort of than not laughing.
Yeah, definitely.
To laugh, cry, not crying. So yeah. So in terms of your artwork, we've had this question already in terms of your style has changed. So if you said to yourself sort of 10 years ago that you'd be sitting here now live streaming, you doing digital art, what would you have said to that person?
I would have run away and hid in a corner where they couldn't find me, because I was so shy 10 years ago that I would never have dreamed of getting my art out there. It was really difficult for me to apply to galleries and things like that. So I don't think me 10 years ago would believe this.
I think there's got to be a level of confidence when it comes to being a fine artist as well, in terms of having your work exhibited and approaching galleries and talking about your work and actually standing up in symposiums and whatever else, and talking or unveiling at a gallery and standing there and saying about this piece of artwork and whatever else.
Yeah.
So it is, like we said last week, we talked to Dan, confidence is something that you need to work on.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think by doing these courses and sort of working on these artworks and speaking to different people, because I threw you in the deep end massively when I got you to join the Game Art and Animation Masters, and then day one it was like, right, show your work, which was probably really mean, but your artwork's really good, so that's why I've asked you to obviously come on the stream and stuff like that. So
yeah, to be honest, I think I need that push sometimes, because if you hadn't said, right, show your work, I probably wouldn't have volunteered to do it.
Yeah.
Confidence it's still an issue I have. It is getting better. I think before I'd done the Masters, you would never have convinced me to do a live stream. And just spending every week talking to the group on the MA and tutors and having tutorials, it's made me so much more comfortable talking about my work, because I used to clam up and not really want to say anything. So yeah, I think it's made a huge difference having to talk about it.
I mean, we do group crits for that reason. So
Yeah.
really early on in level 4 and things like that, we start getting people just to post the odd piece of work and then just say a couple of sentences about it. And then by the time you get to level 7, 4 years later, you're able to stand there and show your work and talk about it, and your confidence has grown no end.
Exactly.
I think one of the things that, I mean, we do, or I've done these progress pitches where I get students just to put a couple of images together and then talk about those images every few weeks. And that's helped build confidence no end, and people end up being able to stand up and talk about their work and whatever else. But I find that really difficult with lockdown, because obviously, you can't stand up in front of a class and talk about your artwork. You can share it across the screen, but then you can hide behind the monitor and the keyboard and everything else and turn your camera on.
Yeah.
So I think that's another reason why we started these live streams as well, to try and build that confidence up again and get more students to showcase their artwork, because there's so many fantastic artists out there on Twitch. And we've got so many fantastic artists in the art school at the university that they should all pretty much be on Twitch live streaming what they do in the process and everything else. And then ultimately build that confidence up, talk to people, whether it's on the chat or, because even now just doing this, I mean, before we came on, I'm nervous to talk and stuff, just because you never know who's watching.
Exactly.
I think that's the crazy thing about Twitch is you never know who's watching.
Yeah, exactly. I had a minor panic attack before we came on, just because the thought of it is absolutely terrifying. But it's getting over that hurdle and pushing yourself to do something, and that's what gives you the confidence to do it in the future. Absolutely. So yeah, I think it's a really important thing for artists to do, is to get out and talk about their work.
So if you were going to say to we've got a couple more comments coming through actually. We've got one from DMurray87. Mark would have helped a bit with you coming out of your shell with laughing faces. And then Holly's put, you're doing an amazing job.
Oh, thank you. So
if you were to say to your fellow classmates or students or whatever else about, if I said to them, right, I want more people to do live streams, what advice would you give them?
Be yourself. Expect silly questions, because you're bound to get them in some form. But at the end of the day, it's just, we all know our own work, and it's just talking about it. It's nothing, it doesn't feel that different than doing a tutorial or a group crit. It's really easy to sit and just talk about it and answer these questions, because they're the same sort of questions that we would get ordinarily anyway. So it's not as scary as it sounds. I think if I was stood in front of a lot of people having to say this, though, it might be different. But yeah, with it being online, I think it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, like an auditorium of about 200 or 300 people all watching you draw might be a little bit more daunting.
Yeah, that is truly terrifying. But yeah, I have fun with it as well. That's the most important part, I think.
Absolutely. So in terms of the setup that you've got now, I mean, something I always say to students about when they first start off or you first learn and stuff, I mean, it can be really expensive to get a decent computer that runs Photoshop or some sort of 3D software or whatever else. What kind of setup have you got there at the moment?
So I mainly work on my laptop, which is a HP NV360.
Yeah.
That's great combination of computer and tablet, because it comes with its own pen, and you can use it as a laptop but also use it as a tablet. And I've done most of my work on that. It's only in the past couple of months that I've got this Wacom, however you say it, Cintiq.
Yeah.
And that only became because it was just something a bit extra. And I bought it just to make myself feel better and give me something new to look at that was actually useful, rather than buying clothes and shoes and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's just a nice, simple laptop. It's a bit old now. That's the only thing I would say about mine. So it does get a bit cranky. Like, I couldn't do the stream on it because my laptop would crash using Zoom and Photoshop. But I think the newer versions of it are brilliant for students starting out, because it's not too expensive as far as laptops go, but it also gives you the option to work on it like a tablet, because it does fall back on itself.
Because I mean, the reason why I get students to start thinking about investments and commissions and things like that is, once you've finished your degree or your masters, you've ultimately then got your own little studio set up in your home.
Exactly.
And with the current, obviously, digital artists have been able to work globally for some time. But I think the whole pandemic has made a lot of studios reevaluate.
Yeah, definitely.
What they're spending their money on. So do they spend their money on rent, or do they send you out a top-end computer, or employ you because you're able to work from home?
Exactly. And it's going to save them so much money in the long run, isn't it, if you've got your kit set up ready to go, if they're not having to pay rents and things in offices. So I think, yeah, if you can afford it, go out and get a setup so you can do it, and look at what the kind of companies that you want to work for, what they use as their standard, because obviously it does change from company to company. But if you're aiming at specific places that you want to work, find out what they use, and if there are ways you can get hold of them, like you can get refurbished tablets that work absolutely fine. That's what I'm using. It's refurbished, so, and it was a lot cheaper than buying it brand new.
Absolutely, it's and it's finding the best deal for you at the time as well, isn't it?
Exactly.
Making sure it's within budget and stuff.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Holly, and I think this really might throw the cat amongst the pigeons in terms of, okay, question for both of you: best and worst thing about Wrexham, and we want examples. So for those who are in the chat, those who are watching this, who maybe are not from our locality, Wrexham is a town in North Wales where our university is based. So, I mean, I'm going to start with. I'll start this question off with the best stuff. I was obviously, I'd say obviously, like people know, born and sort of raised in Wrexham. Moved away for a little bit to sort of work in Liverpool and stuff, but ultimately back here working in Wrexham. I think for me, it's the history and heritage of Wrexham. You know, we've got the third oldest football club. I'm not sure if it's the world or the country. You know, we've got a huge brewing history. We've got mining history. You know, it's just so much history within Wrexham. We've even got links to Tolkien, I think, as well, haven't we? Something
Possibly,
to do
yeah.
With, something to do with inspiration and whatever else.
Yeah.
Do you want to go next then with the best things about Wrexham?
I don't know, do I?
D-Murray87's put roundabouts.
So many roundabouts.
Yeah.
I don't know, really. Wrexham was not somewhere I'd ever really planned to kind of live. Obviously, I grew up locally anyway, but it wasn't kind of something I planned for. I don't know. That's probably the toughest question.
Really difficult question. Let's just say coffee. Should we just say coffee shops?
Oh yeah, there's some great coffee shops. Yeah.
we do have some really good sort of independent coffee shops. There's a big shout out there to Bank Street Social.
And to be fair, the live music, when they get good bands come into the football stadium, or
and we have like Focus Wales as well, don't we? Where we
exactly.
have lots of independent bands and stuff. We've had some big names in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I love a good jump about to some good live music. So.
Holly's put Emma's real answer is the people. Ahem.
Yeah.
Roy B has put we've sort of really sort of opened a can of worms with this one. Tolkien got his inspiration for the hobbits from the inhabitants of Clyde. We might just stop there.
Moving swiftly on.
Yeah, and in terms of worst parts of Wrexham, I don't think there is any. I think it's just a beautiful, wonderful little town. And not to mention, we have Hollywood celebrities gracing our
Exactly. New
our
owners of the
doorstep
football
right
club.
now.
Yeah.
So yeah, perfect place to live and study. Well, looking at, I mean, we're coming up to nearly 2 hours, so we've done an hour and 50 minutes. So I'm conscious that you've been slaving away there for the duration of this. So I thought, so what might be a good idea now is to start wrapping things up. And if people have got last minute questions, we'll just go through your website again, like we did at the beginning, and just sort of end on looking through your artwork and what you've done so far.
There we go.
Yeah, if you want to talk us through a few of the highlights, so show us your best pieces of work and tell us why you know these are your best, or I say the best. These are the ones that you like the most.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So this one on the top of the homepage, it was the illustration I did to demonstrate what I wanted to get from my animation.
Mm-hmm.
I really love this piece, particularly the detail of it, because it's so different to the way the animation actually looked. It's kind of like the poster piece to the animated film. So yeah, I spent a lot of time working on that one, and I really love the way it came out. The Dragon Age commission I did for Holly here, that was a really interesting piece because I've not really done kind of game art like that before. And she sent me kind of the screenshots of her character, and I sat and worked out the pose and tried to get in kind of classic backgrounds from the original game, and that it was a really fun one to work on because I didn't have to come up with the armor designs and the backgrounds and things like that. It's all kind of pre-built assets that I just did in my own style. This one I'm really proud of. This is a Dragonborn character for Dungeons and Dragons, who someone who plays in the group with me. I've never done a Dragonborn before, so I thought it was really interesting to do something, particularly one that's lightning based, because it meant instead of doing black outlines in a lot of places, he had white outlines because it looks like he's being lit up from the inside with all this kind of magic, and I sound like a real nerd, I'm sorry. And then this is one of my favorite pieces, even though I did it because I just thought it was a little bit funny, for my graphic novel. Nothing to see yet with my main character.
I mean, absolutely. That's always good to see on a website. And it's kind of like, rather than just seeing a sort of 404 page or text saying "coming soon."
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Quite nice, and it's nice and quirky. It's kind of really cool.
Yeah, that was what I wanted. Something a bit different. So yeah, and then the character development for my two main characters, the original pen drawings, their character sheets for the designs of their armor and their clothing, some of the other characters for Dungeons and Dragons, and then my illustrations, so different commissions I've done. Some of them do show up twice. I did a Tolkien one from The Hobbit because I really love Richard Armitage's Thorin, so that's one of my favourite pieces. Yeah, and they're kind of my favourite pieces. My animation is also on here somewhere, but the sound's a bit janky on that because I haven't fixed it yet.
Right.
So yeah.
So the animation on that, I mean, I'm not sure if the sound would play anyway. Are you able to play it, or?
Yeah, I think so.
So you're just going to need to fix the sound on it. I think it's one of them, isn't it? It's kind of difficult to.
Yeah.
So you can see. I mean, just pause it halfway through.
Okay.
There we go. So I mean, if you look at the amount of detail that's gone into that, all the shadows, the shading, the blood splatters, there's someone there with an arrow sticking out the chest, there's fire, there's clouds, there's so much going on in there, and for a 7-second piece, I think you've achieved quite a lot with that.
Yeah, I am really pleased with it. The sound does need fixing. I need to put sound in for the elf screaming and also for him coming up to attack. But yeah, I wanted to create an animation that showed kind of the richness of the world, because I spent a very long time doing the kind of world building for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to show a world with other things going on in the background, and it's not just going to be this kind of linear story. There are other lives and other things happening.
It's great. I mean, like I say, I was sort of blown away with the amount of, for the first animation, of how much stuff you really wanted to put into animation. So yeah, it's really good. I mean, so now, I mean, last minute sort of questions. If anyone has got any last minute questions, then certainly fire those in. But I think we're coming up to about the 2-hour mark now. So I think the only thing that's left to say is thank you so much for joining me tonight and sort of showing us your artwork. Sharing your process. We've got Jenny Flower 29. Amazing job, brilliant to see you in action. You're a natural.
Oh, that's my little sister.
So we've got we've had loads of positive comments. I definitely think you've got potential to become a Twitch streamer. Rita 11 has put, remember us when you're famous. And you've got potential to take this to a collector's edition and everything else. Good luck with your final pieces for your master's final show. And certainly, if anyone's interested in commissions, get in touch with Emma via Instagram, DMs and stuff. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Before we end, what I'll do is I will throw the thank you for watching screen on a second, but I think we've got around about 13 people watching, so I definitely think we should do a rate on somebody else's channel. So, and as that, what we in the sort of thing of the etiquette of raids is we need to come up with a random word. So I think you need to come up with a random word, Emma, that once people fire into this other person's chat right now, is that you just say that word and confuse them.
I would like everyone to say hobbits because it's such a good word. Yeah, hobbits.
So when I fire this raid up in a second, if you join the raid, then type into that person's chat hobbits. Are you ready for this? Okay, I will fire that on now. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you on the other side.